I'm going to, after all is said and done, do my talk from here. The problem is I can't see my slides very well, but I would like to first thank the Center for Democracy. I have been working with you all as partners for some time, and Center for Democracy did a study for us when I was in the Obama administration called the Kremlin Playbook. It was so influential, it was held up by a senator on the floor of the Senate saying, you have to read this study. And last year, Center for Democracy helped us with, we were doing the first phase of a global gas study and did think tanks, talked with think tanks in regions of the world, had 9 different events with think tanks, and Center for Democracy helped us with that. So. And I would like to say one other thing. I would like to extend my sympathies and support for the people in Ukraine. Their courage and perseverance in these times are an example for all of us in the world. And I am hope that things get resolved soon. And it's just been amazing to watch their courage, so I would like to acknowledge that. And I'm going to cover a broad range of topics. Let me get started here. First, I'm going to talk about climate change and urgency. 2019 was the second warmest year on record in history. In the past 5 years have been the hottest 5 on record as well. Arctic warming is 2 to 3 times faster than the global average. Sea levels are rising, have risen 7 to 8 inches since 1900. Atmospheric concentrations in May of 2019 reached 415 parts per million. This blew me away. That's the highest concentration in 800,000 years. So I'm going to skip through these. The point is addressing climate change is urgent, and I don't want to ever lose sight of that fact. And so you can't read these either. So I'll have to read them for you. And the slides are not advancing. These are, and I did this figure about 2 years ago. Okay, they're advancing without me pushing the button now. These are countries around the world that have committed to net zero, are considering net zero, have net zero in law, et cetera, et cetera. And the U.S., I am proud to say, has now joined the countries again that are committed to net zero. But I did this figure 2 years ago. It was 17 countries. 2 years later, it was 130 countries, 2 years. So net zero is a huge commitment, and there are only, 200 countries in the world. 130 of them have committed to net zero. A lot of them are island nations. They're very worried about rising sea level and what that means for them, but it just says a lot about where we are going vis-a-vis net zero. I know everyone has been talked about scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, and what you can see here, the scope 1 are direct emissions, scope 2 are indirect emissions, supply chains, et cetera, and scope 3 are all the embedded emissions. And I do think what the EU is doing on carbon border adjustments is going to drive methodologies, development of methodologies, and insurance that we actually capture all of these different, the scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. When you're just talking about net zero, that's very important. In putting another study together that I did, the global shipping emissions, it's only 3% of total emissions are counted in no country's nationally determined contribution. So we're going to have to start counting those when you're talking net zero. That's just one example of a supply chain emission and the methodologies that we need to capture and accurately, gosh, you just can't see these. I'm so sorry. What this is and its percentage of power generation by source. And in the upper left-hand corner there, that's the U.S. We are nuclear 19%, natural gas 38%, coal 25%. When I was working in the Obama administration 5 or 6 years ago, coal was 50% of our generation. Coal has declined dramatically in the United States. And so big changes. That's Europe. Renewables are 37%, but 15% of that is wind and solar. That's a lot of hydro there. A lot of nuclear, 23%, only 18% coal, 21% natural gas. You are fortunate that you have hydro. That's going to change. And I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. Japan, 34% natural gas, 32% coal. Then you look at China. China is 65% coal generation. So, and I'll say a little bit more about what we need to do about that in a minute. India, 72% coal generation. So in my view, and I'll talk about this, carbon capture and sequestration is critical for countries with 67, 75% coal generation. And it's critical in a lot of places. I don't want to tell Bulgarians about Bulgaria, okay, because I am not an expert here. But over on the left there, that is Bulgaria's total energy consumption. You're fortunate. Natural gas is not a huge percentage of your total consumption here. Coal is a large percentage. That's power generation there. Coal 33%, nuclear 41%. That's good. Nuclear doesn't emit any carbon. I am worried. I've tried to find the number last night, and I looked at it for the United States as well. How much of enriched uranium is Bulgaria importing from Russia? United States, it's close to 20% of our enriched uranium is coming from Russia. So that's an issue too when we're talking about Russia and energy security. This is unsubsidized, levelized cost of electricity and storage, and for plants entering service, and this is our Energy Information Administration, plants entering service in 2026. And the red there is levelized cost of energy and storage. The blue is levelized capital costs, and I can't see the capacity factor is that number, the 10% there in the left-hand corner. For those of you who don't reside in the energy space, capacity factor is you install 250 megawatts of wind, and it has a 40% capacity factor. That means you're getting 40% electricity from that 250 gigawatts. And so you look there, combustion turbines, those are gas turbines, they're just peakers, they don't operate very often. Your combined cycle NGCC's capacity factor of 87%, you can see the numbers there, $37 is the levelized cost of electricity. There is advanced nuclear, $69, that's expensive. Capacity factor is 90%. So your nukes are running full out. Then you look at battery storage, $122 almost, and 10% capacity factor. Geothermal, very inexpensive, and 90% capacity factor. Those are your dispatchable technologies. Those can be used to firm the system when you need electricity. These are your non-dispatchables. This is the onshore wind cost, $37, 41% capacity factor. Offshore wind, 44%, but $120, very expensive. Solar, onshore, $33. hydro 55. Those are your non-dispatchable technologies. There is a lot of discussion that wind and solar are cheaper than gas and coal, and when you look at those numbers for the levelized cost of energy, they are, but they need storage. And the battery storage is $120. So don't let people tell you right now that wind and solar are cheaper. They need battery storage. It's expensive. And so we need the wind and solar, but it's not necessarily expensive. We need incentives. I just had an interview with Bloomberg before coming in here. They raised these G7 energy security principles. We negotiated these. I went to Secretary Moniz in 2014 after Russia invaded Crimea and said our energy security focus in the world was very oil-centric, and we needed to think about energy security in a very different way. We then went to Rome, negotiated with energy ministers, G7. We kicked Russia out of it. It had been G8, kicked Russia out. It was G7, and developed a new set of energy security principles. And developing flexible, transparent, competitive energy markets, especially gas markets. That was a huge focus. Modernizing infrastructure to improve system resilience. Diversifying fuels and sources of supply, and encouraging indigenous sources of energy. Reducing greenhouse gas emissions, put in climate change as a very significant energy security concern. Enhancing energy efficiency. Deploying clean and sustainable energy technologies, and ensuring emergency response systems, which had been what we had thought about energy security all along. And since then, that was 2014, I have added my own. I think these need to be added to the G7 principles, addressing and constantly updating responses to cybersecurity. It was not a huge issue in 2014, but in 2015, Russia attacked 3 distribution systems in Ukraine via a cyber attack and shut them down for some time. So cybersecurity became an issue shortly thereafter. And then another one, which I'm going to talk about today, is protecting supply chains for key metals and minerals for clean energy technologies, something that we had not been thinking about in 2014 either. I'm going to talk about some of those. You can't read them. So the director here already mentioned these reliance on Russian gas. You can see there, I think that's Bosnia is 100%, Finland 94%, Bulgaria there at 77%. I've heard different numbers as I've been having dinner with people here the last couple of evenings. We had the same numbers. Okay, so yours was, I was glad to hear we're using the same source, 77%. But, you know, I was surprised looking at Poland and Italy and France, substantially reliant on Russian gas as well. And these are liquefaction and regasification facilities by region and continent. This was in 2019. So your orange are your liquefaction facilities, and you can see the numbers around the world. Those are 47 liquefaction facilities around the world, and I can't read it. 27% in North America, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can't read it, I can't read it either. But here are your regasification facilities around the world, very important for Bulgaria right now, and importantly, regas in Greece. I think there's one, and they're building another regasification facility in Greece. 2 or 3 in Turkey as well. So if you're trying to get off Russian gas and you need imports, regasification facilities could be very important. And up there in the green box up in the right-hand corner, I have put, and I will make these slides available since you can't read them, put what energy security principles are either raised by this or addressed by this. So clearly this is gas markets and diversifying sources of supply, et cetera, are the energy security principles addressed by that. And I'm going to show you here, these are actual headlines from newspapers in the United States around 2003, 2004. And those are the energy security principles again. The chairman of the Federal Reserve, Alan Greenspan at the time, testified on Capitol Hill that the United States was facing an impending natural gas crisis. ExxonMobil said the U.S. was, we needed to import gutter gas into the United States for LNG supply. I can't read these. Exxon says North America gas production has peaked in 2004. Huge natural gas field was discovered in Texas in, I can't read the date there, I think it was around 2007. That's the Barnett Shale gas field. The gas production takes off. U.S. shale gas plays are starting to affect the global LNG market. These are good progression through time. And then I thought this was funny after Exxon said we were running out of natural gas. In 2007, it bought XTO, which was shale gas, a company in the United States. And I show you these because the change in the U.S. natural gas position in the world, where Europe is hugely reliant on U.S. LNG, et cetera, has been because of shale gas. And as recently as 2003, experts were going to Congress and saying North America was running out of natural gas. And this is what happened. And this is a timeline and policies for shale gas development in the U.S. And people don't know this, okay, but because I worked at the Department of Energy for 12 years as a I'm the longest serving political appointee in the history of the department. I worked for 8 years in the Clinton administration, 4 years in Obama. I knew about this. One of the first things that the Department of Energy did when it was founded in 1978 was characterize shale basins. So it had been looking at shale for a long time. And there was an organization called the Gas Research Institute that got money for research from volumes of gas, fee placed on volumes. It did research over that time period there. And it was basically the gas research arm of the U.S. government at that time. And there was a time-limited tax credit, Section 29 tax credit for shale gas development. And you can see how long it took. And there you see the gas produced under the tax credit in the green there, and the gas produced after the tax credit. So it was a combination of policies, technologies. It really, horizontal drilling and development of horizontal drilling took a huge, was a huge advancement in the development of shale. And so, but it took a long period of time. People think shale in the United States developed overnight. It did not. And, but it has changed. It has changed, brought us to where we are today, where the U.S. is able to ship so much LNG to Europe in this crisis and around the world. And these are U.S. LNG by vessel and pipeline 2018 and 2020. Again, I'm sorry, you can't read these. I can't read them either. That's Mexico. So 2020 is green. Mexico went down. LNG shipments went down quite a bit. Caribbean way up. South America, all other regions way up. Europe went up dramatically, almost doubled. Asia, Middle East went down. Asia way up. And here, Mexico went down with LNG, but it went way up with pipeline exports. So they're getting a lot of pipeline gas from U.S., as is Canada. And these are the percentages. And when you look, this was stunning to me, in 2 years, U.S. LNG exports to Europe went up by 492% in a 2-year time period. So and the U.S. and Asia, I mean Europe and Asia are now close to the same levels of LNG exports from the United States. The Asians are very, very nervous about that because they completely rely on LNG. They don't have gas production in most of Asia. They do in Australia and Malaysia and some places, but not a lot of gas production, and are now worried about the competition for the LNG supplies and what that will do to price. This was before Ukraine. So it's even more of a concern now. Let me skip through these. It's not moving. Okay. I'm going to skip this slide. This just shows you more specifically what countries, the huge increases in some of the countries of LNG exports from the U.S. So let me just go through that. The point has been made. This is interesting, another point, and shows you the impact of Ukraine. The kind of orangish brown part of that bar is Europe. So there you see Europe in June of 21. This is Europe in February of 2022. So obviously those are U.S. LNG export cargoes. Again, taking care of our friends and allies in Europe, making our friends and allies in Asia nervous. But another thing there, that is volumes of U.S. LNG to be determined. Our contracts for LNG do not have destination clauses in them, so there's a lot of flexibility as we are shipping LNG, and that TBD is important for supply in the future. These are approved North American LNG export terminals. This was kind of a surprise to me as well when I looked at this. Those are approved and under construction, 3.5 billion cubic feet a day. Those are approved by FERC but not yet under construction. So those are projects that are in development. That's 25 BCF a day. That's very important as we are talking about getting off Russian gas in Europe and getting more natural gas from the U.S. And when I testified before the Senate Energy Committee 2 weeks ago, I said, get those projects moving. That's a lot of gas. It is creating there's a huge need and demand for it now. They've been approved by FERC. Get them constructed and get them moving. I also looked at LNG tankers. There are adequate tankers to move additional LNG from the U.S. So this is something that will help get Europe off of Russian gas and keep it off of Russian gas in the future. Very important. This is a plan for how the EU can cut Russian gas imports by 2025. Some policies and technologies there. Over here on the far left, that is Russian gas. Okay, and I don't know what the 152 billion cubic meters. And these are policies and things that are recommended in this. It's a global gas LNG hub recommendations. There you see increased imports of LNG. That's the biggest Another is, I can't read it, it's implement the European Fit for 55. Okay, implement that policy. That gives you a lot. That is, I'm sorry, I just can't read the slides from here. Any rate, those are policies to get off Russian gas, okay? The IEA also developed a set of 10 recommendations to get Europe off of Russian gas, and it's don't sign any new contracts, replace Russian supplies with alternative sources. That's where the U.S. Projects in development become important. Introduce minimum gas storage obligations. You talked about gas storage, hugely important. The information I looked at said Bulgaria has a fair amount of gas storage, more than other countries in Europe, but I've heard that that's not accurate, so I don't know the answer, but you do have gas storage options. Maximize power generation from bioenergy and nuclear. That will reduce natural gas use. Germany's not helping with that, shutting down their nukes, and then efficiency, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to skip into this. That's gas. I'm going to talk a little bit here about sequestration and the need for that. And this is a study that we did with Stanford University. And what you're seeing here, these are data. It's not modeling. And it is every day of the year in 2017 in the state of California, wind and solar generation. The wind is blue, the solar is red. And the numbers that you see coming up are the numbers of days in the year, in 1 year in California with little to no wind. 90 days with little to no wind. 10, 11 days in a row with little to no wind. And I mentioned battery storage and the cost of battery storage. It's also, the duration is 4 hours. And the numbers you're looking, that's California in the middle there. It had 502 megawatt hours of battery storage in 2019. Its generation was 202,000 megawatt hours, 90 days with no wind. The point is that battery storage has a duration of 4 hours, and it's very expensive. And so it, again, wind and solar, the conclusion we reached when we looked at this is you need a fuel. Quite frankly, you can use a lot of wind and solar, but you have to have a fuel. Battery storage, grid scale storage is not adequate, so you need a fuel. And this was a technology study, not a policy study. So we assumed their policies, and we looked at the different technologies that were available, and you can't read those, but what you're seeing there is in the electricity sector and in the industrial sector, carbon capture and sequestration was by far the largest emissions reduction potential that you got by technology. And so in electricity, it was 2.5 times higher than the next highest emissions reduction potential, and for industry, 2 times emissions reduction potential. And so that takes you to CCUS. If you're going to have to use a fuel, battery storage is expensive and not adequate. You need a fuel backup. You need CCS for that fuel that fuel use in order to address the climate issues that are associated with it. And IEA, this is a comparison of 2 of their scenarios. Their quote coming out of this is it's virtually impossible to meet net zero targets without CCUS. And you've got a lot of coal generation here. You saw China, you saw India. You need a fuel, in the US, you need fuel for wind and solar. Batteries are inadequate right now. You need CCUS. And people say CCUS is not active. This is 19 major projects around the world for CCUS. Those are the projects in the United States. We don't have any CCUS project for gas generation. We have one for coal, not one for gas. So it works, okay, and it requires a lot of infrastructure, but it is not pie in the sky. It is a technology that's already being used. You can use it. The CCUS made us look at another issue, and I'm sure you all have heard a lot about hydrogen. It's the talk of everything these days. This is a map of the United States, and it's an overlay of two maps. One are CCUS sites, potential sites, and the other is the 10 electricity regions around the United States. So the red there, those are oil and gas reservoirs. Where you could store carbon. The beige is saline aquifers. The black there in the middle, that's an unminable coal seam. I suspect you have those in Bulgaria. I'll show you what this is in a second. These are the regions and how much coal and gas generation you have. I'm in New Mexico right now. It's 67% gas and coal generation. You think we're going to replace that with wind and solar by 2030? We're not. Okay, it's a huge. The highest is there in Texas, Oklahoma. That's 73% gas and gas and coal. The lowest is the Western United States, and that's 36%. But that's because they have so much hydro, but it is glacier-fed hydro, and the glaciers are melting. They've got a big problem from climate change. What you're seeing here, I have plotted, those are where the steel plants are. The cement plants came up a second ago. Those are where refineries are. These are approximate number of gas processing units in the United States. And these are the chemical processing units. Those are all of them. And I've done the overlay of those on top of sequestration sites. Those are all large carbon emitters. And what you start seeing here are hydrogen CCUS hubs forming up around the country. And I showed this. The World Economic Forum has had me show this slide around the world because the potential for hub creation is, I'm sorry? Just 2 more minutes. Okay, all right. Okay, I'm being shut down, okay? I'm just going to say a little bit about metals and minerals. And these are metals and minerals for clean energy technologies. It is a growing energy security issue. We need to be paying attention to it. And that blue, that's copper. Okay, how much copper you need for offshore wind. You need copper for natural gas, too. It's not only clean energy technologies, and then that's manganese. I can't tell what they are. Zinc, okay, so I'm going to skip through this. The point is you need these metals and minerals for power generation. EVs, this says we're basically going to add 170 million EVs to the world by 2030. They use huge amounts of copper, okay? This is copper. Copper demand, I keep talking about it. Copper demand in China in 2030 is going to be greater than copper demand in the whole world in 2020. So, and look at how much copper, the bottom is an EV, 183 pounds of copper. The top is an internal combustion engine. That's the difference. And in that box, you can't read it, but there are other uses of copper. So you are competing for other uses of copper, building, construction, electronic components, transportation, et cetera, are competing when you're building these electric vehicles that demand all this copper. You're competing for the copper with a lot of industrial subsectors as well. And so let me just get, this is the critical mineral definition. I'm just going to show you one more slide, okay, that will show you some of the energy security issues. This is U.S. import dependence, where we're 100% import dependent, and the things you can't read in red are the technologies that you need these critical minerals for clean energy technologies. There we are 50 to 96% import dependent. Lithium is in that category. Silver's in that category. Things that you need for lithium-ion batteries. And but this is where the U.S. is getting its metals and minerals from. The green is where we're 100% dependent. Okay, so those green, you know, they're coming from around the world. But let me get to the big kahuna here that we are all very dependent on, and that is coming up here. It's not moving. That is China. Okay, here it's almost coming up. There you go. That's China. And the green is U.S. 100% import dependent, and we're getting it all from China. So, and the one more, I said there was only, I would only show this one, but one more slide here. I've taken Russia and China out of the equation. Where are we getting those metals and minerals from? And you can see where we're getting them from. But I've also highlighted on this slide which countries have net zero targets. We're going to be competing with our friends and allies for these metals and minerals because all these countries have net zero targets. So, at any rate, I'm going to shut up and because I've been told to. My friends have told me to shut up. I did look at. I'm sorry, it's just this clicker's not really working. I do have. I looked at Bulgaria and its critical metals and minerals, and I can't get through fast enough to get to the slide, but manganese and manganese, the U.S. is 100% import dependent. The production, the mining of manganese in Bulgaria dropped to zero between 2015 and 2019. I don't know the reasons why. I know in the U.S. we have a huge number of inactive mines, and I asked the CEO of Rio Tinto one night. I had dinner with him. Why are these inactive? Did we deplete the resource, or did it become uneconomic? And he said they're all Superfund sites. It's environmental issues. And so, and I suspect those are the inactive mines. This is Bulgaria. And so manganese, you're still mining cadmium, copper. You saw how important that is. Zinc, very important. Gold, very important. Silver is hugely important in batteries. And lead and fluorspar, but you've stopped mining that as well. And I'm going to say one other. I said I was going to shut up, but I'm not. I got one more thing to show you. I think that we need to develop an index for responsible mining and environmentally responsible mining. We have leads for buildings, efficient buildings, et cetera, start doing a certification or ISO standards for mines. And these, I found a responsible mining index. These are things in that index that we should be looking at for developing the standards for mines. And I said that in my testimony in Senate Energy. and they want to talk to me about what we should be doing in that regard. And Bulgaria has a lot of mines and mining activity. It needs to be responsible mining. It could be something you all could do here too.
Thank you, Melanie. Thank you so much.